It's a funny place to be, stuck in a seemingly mundane world with an inner knowing that the universe is so much more than our mortal minds can comprehend. Yet we all have the capacity to know peace and our oneness with the wholeness of life. And through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share this possibility. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and this is the Kriya Yoga Podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kriya Yoga Podcast. I have with us today returning guest Ryan Strong, a Kriya Yoga teacher and student of Roy Eugene Davis. And today we're going to be talking about Ayurveda and how Ayurveda relates to Kriya Yoga and how it can help support our meditation path. So thank you for being here with us again today, Ryan.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, always good to see you. All right, Ryan. Today we're going to talk about how Ayurveda relates to Kriya Yoga and how it can support our meditative practice. So I'm sure you've probably talked with a lot of people about this. What are some of the most foundational important principles related to Ayurveda to help support our practice?
That's a big subject, and there's a lot that we can go into about it. But I think one of the most helpful things that Ayurveda helps everyone with, but especially those of us on the Kriya Yoga path, is that, we have to deal with this mind, this body, this personality, the ahamkara, this thing that we are operating through. And Ayurveda helps us balance it, or just be able to live in this body and live with our mind and deal with our personality and all these things that are a part of living. It helps us do so with more ease.
Right. So it's kind of like the owner's manual for our car.
It is. I think so.
You can't ignore the fact that you still need oil changes, even though you're a Kriya yogi and practicing meditation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's all the things that come up with the body and especially the mind. I think that Ayurveda is really, as far as meditation goes and living consciously, by just understanding our dosha and working with it, we can have a lot less symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And so, when we do this 12-part class, I know we're going to go a lot more into like the idea of doshas. And for people who are maybe new or aren't familiar so much with Ayurveda, could you tell us really what the word Ayurveda means, and also what are these ideas of the doshas that they talk about in Ayurveda?
Yeah, so Ayurveda is the science of life. Ayur being life and Veda being knowledge, basically, in the simplest way. So it's the knowledge or the science of life. And it is looking at this physical creation through the principles of Samkhya philosophy and looking at all the elements. So everything in this world is made up of the elements, which are really a byproduct of the gunas. And so we're looking at how each one of us, each person we're looking at our individual makeup of these elements and how to work with them to be more healthy. And so when we look at the dosha, we're looking at patterns of really like energy. If we're looking at the five elements and all the ways that they express, they're all different forms of energy. And there are patterns of these energies that connect. So, for example, a dosha means fault. And we'll come back to that, I'm sure. But dosha, when we're looking at the three doshas, for example, we're looking at how the elements combine to make these biological patterns within our world, but even more importantly, or more specifically, to our body. And like what I was going to say was Vata, it's the dosha of movement, if you will. And Vata is a combination of air and ether, of Akasha and Vayu. And so when we're looking at a dosha, we're just really looking at how the elements have combined within nature or within our nature and how they are functioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you use the idea of Vata as being movement, like air and ether. So then there's Pitta and Kapha as well. What are those?
Yeah. So Pitta is mostly fire, but it's the makeup of fire and the element of water, but it's mostly fire. And Pitta is the function of all of our digestive processes. And so anything that, as far as our body is concerned, anytime we digest food or we digest sunlight or we digest light through our eyes, this is all a function of Pitta. And Kapha is a combination of earth and water. And so it is Kapha that gives us the structure, the form, the lubrication, the protection.
Right.
And yeah.
And so everyone has, since people can relate to the fact that there are different body types, the tall, skinny person, or the person who might be a little shorter, a little more stouter, these kinds of things. So everyone's different in that they have a different makeup, and that's reflected by the amount of how these doshas sort of express in their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we can say that everybody has a constitution, and that constitution is really unique to them. And the term that we'll use for the constitution that we're born with is prakriti, and prakriti means original nature. And this happens at the moment of conception. And, it's a byproduct of our karma, but we can be even more specific. Of course, so much of it has to do with our parents and their unique genetic blueprint, their own dosha, and how these things blend at the moment of conception. That creates our dosha, which is going to be a combination of all three doshas. Everybody has all three, but we might be dominant in one. We might be a close combination of two, or have all three. Yeah.
Right. And so it's sort of like, the world is made up of the 5 elements. So the 5 elements are everywhere, but different parts of the world have different, a balance of each element. So our bodies, the doshas are everywhere, but our individual bodies might sort of emphasize a particular quality of some of these doshas.
Absolutely. I'm sure maybe someone listening has a child, and maybe they have a couple of children, and
maybe 8.
If you have,
maybe 8.
Maybe 8. Yeah, maybe 8. But you can see their constitution reflected in them pretty quickly. You have a child like my son. When he was born, he slept a lot, and he was just a really sweet, watery baby, and he just was really calm. And my daughter, she was fiery. So just right away, just so much fire. So she would be. We could say that she had more pitta, right? More of this expressive intensity, fire, emotional, energetic way about her. And my son is more kapha, more of that water, more of that earth, more grounded in that way. Right.
And that's what a person has from birth. But like when I think back through my life, when I was younger, I was more portly and snotty and kapha-like, I think.
Yeah.
And then as I went through high school and young adulthood, I became much thinner and willower. Willowier.
There we go.
But then as I got older, I also then started to get a little thicker again, I suppose. Meaning that's from working out and stuff. But what I'm trying to get at here is, there's the birth constitution, but that can move through time.
Absolutely. So we have that prakriti we have our unique genetic blueprint, our constitution at the moment of conception. But in the womb, depending on how our mom is eating and the climate that she's in and all the situations, all the elements, they affect us as early as being in gestation. And so from the moment of being in the womb, our dosha is under the influence of all the elements. And this happens throughout our whole life. So we have the prakriti, but then we have vikruti, and vikruti is what is our current state, what is right now. Our original constitution will never really change, but it's always under the influence of all the elements. So again, what we're eating, what time of year it is, what the climate is, all of these things. But then going back to your question, there are natural stages of dosha development in our life. And when we're first born, from being a baby all the way until we're in puberty, we're in kapha time of life. So this is where we're growing so much, and we're more watery, more snotty, all these kind of things as a whole. And it's going to be different for each person, but there's more of this. And then we go through puberty. And then from puberty until later in life, we are in pitta stage of life. And so there's so much more movement. There's all that rajas energy. It's where we're going to do the most of our work in this life. And then for women, or for biological women, they start to go into vata time of life when they hit menopause. And so that is the next stage of life, vata. And for men, it can happen a little bit later. It just depends on each person, but around the age 65, typically we can say that person's well established in vata time. So it's kapha, and then it's pitta, and then it's vata time of life.
Got it. And since we've been talking, it actually gave me another idea for the class that we're going to be doing. It occurred to me, we're going to be talking a lot about the elements.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to be digging into this too, but one of the descriptions of tapas, or practice, as it relates to Kriya Yoga, is, in a sense, kind of control or purification of the elements through the elements and the senses and the sense organs and these kinds of things. So, one of the things I think is interesting is that through the study of Ayurveda and the application of what we learn from Ayurveda, one of the ways that helps our practice is because when we live a certain way, that helps to balance the elements of our body, which also helps to balance our mind and our senses.
Absolutely.
And that's part of tapas. That's part of one of the definitions of Kriya Yoga.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important. And just real simple too, in a lot of ways, because the dosha, or the elements, have their energies. And we can look at it really simply: sattva, rajas, tamas, for example. And when we find what keeps us in balance, we are less likely to be taken on the ride of rajas, just have so much ambition and just drive and just doing too much. And then we're letting go of all of our ojas, or our core vital energy. So by purifying and balancing pitta, or that fire element within us, we can hold on to our ojas, we can hold on to our vitality, we can have deeper, longer meditations, possibly, things like this.
Right. Yeah. And I did want to ask you a question about ojas. I'll try to remember, hopefully. If I don't, remind me when we get towards the end. But what you were just talking about there, the sattva, rajas, and tamas.
Yeah.
Again, I know many people who are listening probably are very familiar with that. But can you give us a little understanding of what those terms are, what they relate to?
Yeah, well, they're core attributes of the physical reality that we're in. And we often will, as you've experienced, I'm sure, when we look at it, we can say that tamas is negative, or sattva is very positive. And I think to understand them, we want to ignore that for a little bit. Is that tamas is a energy within this world, within our universe, that's heavy. And so things that are tamasic hold together. It creates inertia. So, like you could say, gravity, in a way, is tamasic. You hold a rock, and it's tamasic, so it has a heavy quality. Where rajas itself is the energy within this world and within this universe that is changing things from one thing to another. So rajas is just all about movement of form. When anything changes from one thing into another, that's rajas, and it's this heating quality. And we can see this in just observing anything that is alive. It's changing from one form into another. I don't know if that's a great example, but rajas is just about movement, and it can create a lot of heat and friction. And sattva has the quality of light, lucidity, and we can think about that within ourselves as feeling uplifted or inspired. When we do pranayama, we're really working with bringing in this prana, and it's helping elicit and create more of a sattvic impression within our mind, right? And so did I describe those in the right, did that make sense?
One of the ways I looked at it when I was reading the Holy Science was that Thomas is like the grounding force.
Yeah.
And those of you who are electricians, don't don't jump on us for misusing the metaphor here. But it's like Thomas is the grounding force, and then Rajas is like the neutralizing force. But in order for something to be neutralized, there has to be activity. You have to like discharge it. But Thomas is what's being discharged to, whereas Sattva is like the pure energy. So it's like moving from energy, movement being discharged into the ground, as an example. That's how I would sometimes look at those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we look at something, for an example that might make this helpful, is like, so if you're more kapha, right? So if you have more kapha, you have more of the element of earth and water, possibly more of the other. But so we're people that are more kapha are going to be a lot more sensitive to things that increase kapha. And so let's say that somebody has too much kapha, and they're going to gain a little bit extra weight, but they're going to also feel a little bit heavy. Their digestion becomes sluggish. Their mind can become dull and sluggish. So if we're kapha and we engage in doing things that increase kapha, then we sit to meditate, and it's just like you're just so aware of the body, and it's hard to pull up the energy. It's hard to actually hold it. It's just you feel heavy, dull, and tamasic in this way, right? Yeah. And for someone that's more pitta, then they're gonna try to meditate, but they're gonna meditate with too much intensity. I'm gonna get somewhere. I'm gonna make something happen, or they don't have enough time. That's the bigger thing with rajas or pitta, or those two qualities together. It's the person will often have so much going on in their life that they might be able to meditate for 20, 25 minutes, but everything else is scheduled and they have to get up and run.
Right. Yeah. So, kind of getting into this idea, it's similar to, say, if you're a pitta type, you might, if you are a pitta type and you discover that you're a pitta type, you might not necessarily want to go do hot yoga 5 days a week.
You might want to.
Well, you might want to.
but no. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. The very simple, simply, but like increases like. And so if you're already super hot and intense and you have all this fire, maybe you have rashes, maybe you have acid reflux, maybe you deal with being overly critical of yourself or others and this kind of thing. So then a lot of times when there's all this heat, if we eat spicy foods, or we go out and do hot yoga, or we want to go do a run in the middle of the day, these kind of things, it's just going to make all of this stuff worse, or more. It's going to increase the dosha.
Yeah, that's what I always found really kind of lovely about Ayurveda, was that once you kind of figured out what your dosha was, what your constitution was, if you paid attention, you could kind of balance it, and it also taught you discipline, because I do have a lot of pitta, and sure enough, when was the time I wanted to go mow grass? 1 p.m. That's when I thought, that's when I needed to go do it. Or I wanted to do activities which were really hard and really kind of took a lot of energy, when really it might have been better if I focused more on like Tai Chi or Qigong or soft flowing things. And it always seems to be that whatever the person is, if they don't know about Ayurveda, they will tend to always usually want to do the thing which is going to imbalance them.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something that I've thought I've seen.
Yeah, well, it is true. It tends to be true. So if we have an imbalance, an example for a vata, someone that's very vata, they might gravitate towards taking a lot of coffee or drinking tea or something that stimulates them, but they're already overly stimulated, right? So what they say is, when you're out of balance, you crave what keeps you out of balance. And it's almost like the dosha has a mind of its own. So if we're out of balance, we crave what keeps us in balance. But it's also the opposite, is that when we're in balance, when we have a more balanced state, we really do crave what keeps us in balance. And I've definitely noticed that throughout my life.
Yeah. When I first started kind of exploring Ayurveda, I noticed, this pattern of the things that would imbalance my dosha. I already had a tendency to kind of want to do, exercising too hard. Let's go get some hot, spicy fried chicken wings.
Yeah.
But then what happened is once I started applying the basic principles of Ayurveda in my life, then I wanted to do the stuff that actually was better for me.
Yeah, because you felt better.
Yeah, like right? It's like I knew, because people bring this up. They say things like, well, I know I need to eat meat because I crave it. I'm thinking, well, maybe,
right,
but maybe there's another reason to it, because, when I was younger, that's all my family ate was like meat and potatoes.
Right.
And now that I've taken care of myself better, I really like a salad.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So can you say anything more about that? How long does it take generally from your practice that you've seen? How long does it generally take a person to kind of move into that state where they kind of do want to do the things that make them feel better after they've applied Ayurveda principles?
It depends on each person, and it depends on how out of balance they were for how long. I do these, I do panchakarma, which is a process of cleansing or purifying the dosha from the body. And it's incredible. But I've seen that to be one of the quickest ways. So if someone is experiencing a lot of imbalance, if they're able to go through panchakarma, it's not for everybody, but they're able to do it, then within a couple of weeks, they feel so different and they feel so much more balanced. And then they want to they want to engage in the foods and the lifestyle and the environments and the relationships that really support them. And I find this to be a lot more true for people that are living on a spiritual path, or they're practicing yoga or Kriya Yoga, because they definitely know, and many have already experienced a level of equanimity or peace within themselves. And so when they get a deeper sense of it, there's like that aha moment, especially for Pitta. A lot of people have so much fire and they don't want to let it go because they feel like they're going to be less effective. So they have like an edge. The fire creates this ambition and there's this edge to what they're doing. And this will often lead towards burnout at some point, right? So it's like, if we can just reduce that heat, they're going to be so much more effective in their life and have more energy and more creativity to do a lot more. But they oftentimes will before it's gone, they'll say, am I going to lose that edge? Am I going to lose this thing that I really value? But then you reduce that dosha and they just feel so much better. Right. And so I know it's not an easy answer or easy question to answer. It's different for each person. Sometimes it can be real quick, and sometimes it'll take a little while.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting about Pitta, it's like you have a wok and all you have is high heat. Yeah. And so you can stir fry and sear some stuff really well. But just imagine if you could turn the heat down a little bit, you could cook so many other things.
That's right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. That's it. And you can just feel better, you know?
And this kind of reminds me of an astrological principle. And before I forget, those of you who are listening, Ryan Strong is also a Vedic astrologer. So those of you who ask, who should I go for astrology? Well, you should go see Ryan Strong for Vedic astrology. So keep that in mind. But the idea with Venus in Vedic astrology, Shukra, a lot of people say that Shukra deals with kind of, it deals with luxury, which it does, but it deals with desire. But what they mistake about it is that Venus is really healthy desire. And that when we see people with addictions or sugar cravings or sloth or whatever it might be, that's an imbalance of Venus. Because when Venus is really healthy, like a good Venus makes you want to do things that truly make you feel good, not because of a drug or a boost. But, Venus knows if you eat that salad tonight, instead of the pizza with sausage and onions, you're probably going to sleep better and you're going to wake up and feel more refreshed in the morning. Like that's a good Venus.
Yeah.
So like, Venus are healthy desires. And I think what you're talking about there, that once you kind of learn to get yourself in balance, then you really naturally want to engage in some of those healthy desires.
I agree. Yeah, Venus wants to bring out the refinement of the experience. And I think it's so true. And it kind of going back to your question, when do people sometimes make that shift? And oftentimes it's like just taking good care of the body, and you start to feel healthier. Like it's like if you need to gain weight, gaining a little bit of weight, or you need to lose weight, losing a little bit of weight. But when it starts to beautify the body, I think and even just a slight way, it has this real positive impact. I think it does help increase that positive Venus or Shukra energy. Yeah.
So two things I would like to try to touch on before we make it to the end of the day. So it might take a little while. One of the things we were going to cover within the 12 section class were this idea of the 3 pillars of health.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could just take a moment to kind of share what those 3 pillars are and just give a little bit of insights about them.
Great. Yeah. So the 3 pillars, it's the idea is if you want balance in your life. So we're going right back to that mind, body, personality, being in this body without too many symptoms, or even better, just having more ease, right? We want to move through our life with ease. And so if we're experiencing psychological symptoms or physical symptoms, we want to see them get better. And if we're not following or managing these 3 pillars of life, then there's not much hope for us. Meaning that each one of these have to be in some level of balance for what we need. So that's the first point, is that these 3 pillars of health are specific to the individual's needs.
And before you go too far, with what you just said, I want to stick with this car metaphor. Yeah. So when you said there's not much hope for us, I think some people could hear that and think, well, great, there's not much hope for me. But I think we need to put it in the context of, like, if you have a car and you change the oil and you manage the struts and you do the timing belts, well, there's more hope that you'll make it to 300,000 miles.
Absolutely.
And there's not much hope if you don't do any of those things that you'll make it to like 50,000 miles. So it's more of just
that's a good way to put it. And I think I said it kind of funny too. It's not that there's not hope. It's just that with the 3 pillars, it's like, if we're not managing these, it's like trying to drive a car with no air in the tires. You're not going to get too far. And this is where the name Ayurveda, the science of life, and really looking at these 3 pillars. So the first one is ahara. It's how we eat. So for each person, we have to eat to live, to maintain the body. Well, I guess there are some people that might not, but I haven't met them. Right. So what we eat and how we eat, that is the first pillar. If we're eating too much for our body type, it's not going to work. If we're not eating enough, it's not going to work. And so this gets a little bit complex, and we spend so much time on this, but it's just finding the right foods and eating them at the right time in the right way. And this is a little bit of a path of discovery. And it's not that we have to be perfect, but if food is completely off, then we're not really going to be able to thrive. And I think if I could go back and change the word hope, I would say thrive, because it's hard to thrive if we're not eating the right food or having the right nutritional value for our constitution. And that's also how we digest our food. That's all part of it. So the first one is food. The second one is sleep. And so it is that if we sleep too much for what we need, or we don't sleep enough for what we need, we are not going to thrive, right? And you can go longer without food than you can go without sleep. I've been sleep deprived before, once or twice, especially when my son was born. And it was like, you start to hallucinate, you start to see things, or you see something in the side, it feels like something's moving behind you, you start to lose your mind a little bit. And so sleep is a pillar. We have to have enough sleep. We have to have deep sleep. It's not about it's about quality and quantity for the individual. For some people, they need to sleep less, like sleeping in the middle of the day, taking long naps, sleeping in. This is just going to increase that tamasic quality. It's going to cause most people to gain weight. We can start to build up toxic, or we can start to build up ama, or undigested. Or we're not digesting our food in the right way, so it starts to build up and cause blockages, if you will. So the first one is food, eating the right way. The second one is sleep, managing that restful rejuvenation aspect of our body. Those are the first two. And the third pillar is brahmacharya. And brahmacharya is often defined as celibacy. But we really want to look at it in a broader way. Brahmacharya is the non-dissipation of life force energy. And so it is not giving away or just burning up our core vital energy. And so brahmacharya is the management of our physical and mental energy. And it comes down to a simple, just simply looking at it like not doing too much. We need to exercise, but if we exercise, we are just depleting our vitality. If we have too much sex or over-engage in sex, we're going to burn up our vitality. If we're over-consumed with work and thinking about stuff too much, it's going to drain our batteries. And so the three pillars of life, it's looking at the individual's constitution. So everyone is different, but it's finding a way to balance these three areas. And if we can get those close, if we can get those improved, everything can improve. And I've worked with people that were terminally ill, and until they were ready to go, these can always be improved. Every single one of us can improve these, and so there is hope.
Yeah. There is hope. There is the manual that will tell you.
Yeah,
and Ayurveda can help you decipher that. And I think it is personal, like you said. I have a friend. He gets by on 6 hours of sleep a night. And I can't do that. I mean, it doesn't work for me. I mean, I can do it, but like I'm not functioning optimally if I do.
Right.
It.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult for people, I think, because not everyone has a lifestyle that allows them to figure out, like, for example, sleep. Like I can figure that out because I am my own boss and I work for myself. So I can kind of set my schedule to figure that out, but some people can't. So I guess I'm kind of curious, what do you say to people, or how do you recommend people to figure out this sleep idea if they have that kind of difficulty? They can't quite just control their schedule that easily.
Yeah. The hardest is with new babies, and so that can be really difficult. And we often will try to come up with a support plan and trying to get them to have more sleep in a way that people can maybe have somebody watch the baby for a little while. But that's the most difficult time. So if you have a baby or a toddler that's not sleeping well, that can be difficult. But for other people, it's about making your health a priority. Like you mentioned a friend that can get by with 6 hours. So there are some people that can do that, and they seem to be doing pretty well. But it's really unnatural to work in a way where we have to do swing shifts or work all night and just have this irregularity. And if you have to do it, then it's finding a way to do it in the best way for you so that you can get that deep sleep. But honestly, the idea would be, and I've had to do this with many clients, is just to find a way. Like, all right, how long do you have to do this? How can you switch into a new career or switch into a new role? Like, how do we get you out of this? And because it's not just a bad idea for most people. It's just toxic, and it can make people really sick.
Yeah.
And some people can do it a lot longer, but it's just really unnatural for us to live in such a way.
Yeah. And so one other thing I know we're going to talk about, I mean, we have there's a large list of topics, and I'll see if I can pull up my email. We can run through them real quick, maybe. But just in case we can't, one of the other important topics that I find really interesting for this class was on the idea of ojas and sort of cultivating ojas in our life. So if you don't mind just describing what that term is, and sort of how that might be approached.
Yeah. So ojas is, we can define it as physical vitality. And it's not subtle. You know, when we talk about something like prana. Prana is subtle. You know, it's not something we can really easily weigh or measure or even see, right? It's subtle. Ojas is physical, and ojas, it is physical excretions that our body creates that work together in concert to strengthen our immune system. It helps our hormones. Ojas builds the health of the body and protects the health of the body. And this includes our mind. It gives us a barrier or some protection against outer stresses, emotional stress. So ojas is physical substances that our body creates. And it creates it through the proper digestion of the right foods, through sleep, and through using our core physical energy in the right way. And some of these substances in modern times, it's considered to be like glutathione, immune proteins. It's considered to be serotonin, epinephrine, cortisol, all these things that work in concert together to strengthen our body and build and support our mind. So it just is so important.
Right. And, you know, all those things you've just listed, you know, the hormones and these kinds of things, I've thought about this before. You know, many people have a lot of difficulties in life just because life is sometimes difficult. But I don't know, I've noticed myself that, say, when I'm able to exercise regularly, get enough sleep, manage drama in my life, even when difficult things come up, I can handle it. Like there's more resilience there. And exactly. I kind of associate that with this idea of what you're talking about, this ojas, because then all the things are working together, you feel better. And so you're more able to navigate the experiences of life. Whereas if that's low, or you're not sleeping well, or, you know, you don't have energy to exercise, or there's this drama, well, the littlest thing can just smash you into the ground, you know.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of what you're getting?
That's it exactly. And ojas does all the stuff, but what it does, it really helps stabilize our mind. And, you know, anyone with a mind, any one of us has the possibility of losing it. If we get worn out, you know, we can go through really hard things, and that can just drain our energy, drain our ojas, and then we can just be a wreck. Mm-hmm. And we can be this way for quite a while. Yeah. And so when we have good ojas, or when we're building ojas, we tend to have this barrier against stress. So that's helpful. But there's a definition of health according to Ayurveda, and the Charaka Samhita, one of the oldest book on Ayurveda, and it defines health and a concept called swastha. Mm. And one of the definitions of swastha is being established within oneself. Mm. All right, being established within oneself. So we can look at this in different ways, but I feel like when our ojas is strong and healthy, we just have this more equanimity. And so with the dramas of life that can pull us into situations that might demand our attention, we can just be more anchored. We can be more grounded and more self-aware, and like, okay, I'm interacting with this, but I don't need to change the things outside of me. I don't need these things to make me happy. I don't need everything to be the way I think it needs to be. We're much more able to be like allowing things to be as they are, to stay more surrendered. Ojas is helpful.
Yeah, that's the title of the class. Ojas is helpful. No, that's good. And what you said just kind of reminded me. It's, you know, one of the important things about yoga and integrating these Ayurvedic principles is, you know, a lot of people begin practicing meditation and they're doing it for stress reduction. They're doing it to feel better.
Yeah.
But, the deeper reason to practice meditation is to recognize that we are this eternal, timeless spirit. And that's a really subtle thing. And if our ojas is strong, or we've been able to manage our life well, in my mind, that allows us to when we meditate, to actually not be meditating just for stress relief anymore, because we're managing our stress, but we're able to stay awake because we've got the energy. We're able to stay internalized because we're comfortable in our strong bodies. And then that allows us to actually kind of practice pratyahara, internalization of attention, to really get into that more dynamic inner aspect of meditation. So it just seems like an understanding of that provides a real foundation for sincere and deeper spiritual practice overall.
Absolutely. It's incredibly helpful.
Yeah. I read this book many times, Talks with Ramana Maharshi. And every time I read it, it's like something new pops out at me. And one of the things he was talking about last night was you have to live so that when you sit down to meditate, you're awake.
Yeah.
He didn't mean like enlightened awake. He meant so that you're actually not falling asleep and you're actually able to get into the subtlety of the process. And one of the things he talks about is one of the greatest aids to that. When he was asked, the greatest aid was a sattvic diet.
Yeah.
Or a diet which promotes this kind of energy in life. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting
I
stuff.
think it's so true. I think I took a class with Dr. Frawley once of Vamadeva Shastra, and he said, I'll never forget, he said, most people close their eyes to meditate and they wander around in their disturbed minds. And it was about, kind of what we're talking about right now, about just balancing the dosha to support our ability to use like japa or use mantra, to be able to stay, like you said, awake. And so, I think eating a sattvic diet or just eating the right foods for our constitution, I think it's very helpful.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting to go into the sattvic diet aspect of the class, because, people have asked me about that before. What is a sattvic diet? And I have my ideas, but I remember reading Lahiri Mahasaya. It was something like, eat lots of rice pudding and dairy, What do you do if you're lactose intolerant?
Right. It's an ojas building. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, before we finish up today, do you have any books that you would recommend people to look at to kind of get some good general information on Ayurveda? I know Roy has his book. Is it an Easy Guide to Ayurveda? I don't have.
Yeah, Easy Guide to Ayurveda. I think that's a great one.
Okay, so Easy Guide to Ayurveda by Roy Eugene Davis.
Yeah.
Any others you think might be useful?
And Prakruti by Dr. Robert Subodha.
Okay.
Prakruti, that's a wonderful one as well.
How can people get a hold of you for, working with you as an Ayurvedic doctor, and also to tap into your astrological practice?
Yeah, if people are interested, they can go to my website. It's www.stronghealthcenter.org, and it's Strong Health Center is just one word, .org, or they can email me directly at strongveda. So it's strongveda@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've known Ryan for many, many, many years, and I've always appreciated his presentation and his realism with Ayurveda, as well as Vedic astrology. So
Thank you.
I would definitely contact him if you need some services in that regard.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to have you.
Good to be here with you. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
This episode of the Kriya Yoga podcast was made possible by donations from Kriya Yoga apprenticeship students and supporters of our Patreon community at www.patreon.com/Kriya Yoga.